Hey everyone, welcome back to the deep dive. We love getting your requests, and lately we've had a lot of you asking us to dive into the topic of narcissistic relationships.
It's definitely a topic that's been gaining more attention, and for good reason.
It can be really hard to understand, especially if you've never experienced it firsthand.
Right. It's not always so clear cut.
So to really get into it, we're going to be taking a deep dive into this document called Understanding the Impact of Narcissistic Relationships.
Okay, that's good.
And just a heads up, this document gets right to the point. It starts by calling narcissistic abuse one of the worst types of abuse, which is pretty intense.
Yeah. It definitely sets the stage for just how damaging these relationships can be.
Right off the bat, it grabs your attention. It makes you realize this is serious stuff.
Mm.
And that's what we're here to explore today. The
Then,
document goes on to say that narcissistic abuse can be difficult to spot, especially in the beginning.
and that's one of the most dangerous things about it.
Exactly. It almost seems counterintuitive, right? Why would something so harmful be hard to recognize?
Well, it's because narcissists are often incredibly charming, particularly in the early stages of a relationship. They shower you with attention affection gifts.
Like they're trying to sweep you off your feet.
Exactly. They create this perfect illusion, this honeymoon phase where everything seems magical.
Ah, the honeymoon phase. Who doesn't love that?
Right. It's like a dream come true, at least initially.
But the document warns that this intense charm is a calculated tactic.
Oh, absolutely. It's not genuine.
So why do they do that?
It's all part of the manipulation.
Yeah.
The narcissist is creating a dependency, almost like setting a trap.
A trap. So you're saying they're luring someone in with all this charm and affection.
Exactly. Later on, those early acts of generosity, those grand gestures, they can be twisted and used as ammunition in arguments.
That's messed up. So those initial loving acts, those could actually be used against you later on.
Exactly. It's a form of control. They
Yeah.
might say things like, remember when I bought you that expensive necklace? Or remember all those times I did you favors?
Wow. So you're constantly reminded of those early good times, but it's used to manipulate you into doing what they want.
It's a mind game, and it can be incredibly effective.
It's crazy how subtle this can be. So someone might not even realize they're being manipulated.
Right. And that's why it's so important to understand the signs early on.
Well, the document also talks about isolation as a key tactic in narcissistic abuse.
Oh, yeah. Isolation is huge. The abuser might start subtly turning you against your friends and family.
Like planting seeds of doubt.
Exactly. Questioning their motives. Maybe suggesting your best friend is jealous of your relationship or that your family doesn't truly understand you.
Wow, so they're trying to cut you off from your support system.
Exactly. They want you all to themselves. That way you're more reliant on them and it's easier to control you.
That's scary how insidious this can be. It's like they're slowly chipping away at your connections.
And you might not even realize it's happening until it's too late.
So what happens if you do try to reach out for help?
Well, the narcissist might try to win you back with a sudden burst of fake kindness.
Be kindness, like they suddenly switch gears and act like everything's fine.
Exactly. It's a way to further confuse the situation. You might start to question if you were imagining the bad behavior.
It's like they're gaslighting you into thinking you're the problem.
Exactly.
So you're left feeling completely disoriented and unsure of what to believe.
And that's exactly what the narcissist wants. You're trapped in this cycle of idealization and devaluation, never knowing what to expect.
It's a constant emotional roller coaster. And then the document goes on to say that even when the relationship is clearly toxic, the narcissist refuses to take any responsibility.
Of course not. They never do.
It's always someone else's fault.
Always.
So that's where the guilt trips and blame shifting come in.
Exactly. They'll twist things around, making you feel like you're the one at fault for their behavior. You might find yourself constantly apologizing even when you know you've done nothing wrong.
That's got to be so frustrating. It's like you're constantly being put on the defensive.
It is. And it's exhausting. It takes a toll on your self-esteem. You start to doubt your own perceptions, your own sanity.
So instead of feeling energized and happy in a relationship, you're just left feeling drained and exhausted.
Yeah, and it goes beyond just feeling exhausted. The document describes some serious physical symptoms of anxiety that can arise from this type of abuse.
Physical symptoms, like what?
Things like loss of appetite, insomnia, even nausea and stomach pain.
Wow. So your body's literally reacting to the stress of the situation.
Exactly, and it's a sign that something is seriously wrong.
But I imagine the narcissist probably wouldn't acknowledge those physical symptoms as being related to their behavior, would they?
Not likely. In fact, they might even accuse you of being oversensitive or dramatic, further invalidating your experience.
It's like they're twisting the knife even further, making you question your own reality.
That's right. It's all part of the gaslighting, which is something we'll be diving deeper into later in this deep dive.
This is heavy stuff, but it's important to talk about. These are real experiences that people are going through, and we need to shed light on them.
I agree. The more we understand about narcissistic abuse, the better equipped we are to identify it and protect ourselves and others.
So let's keep digging into this document and see what else we can learn about the impact of narcissistic relationships.
Sounds good.
Let's do it.
You know, it's wild to think about how all those seemingly small little acts of manipulation, they can really build up over time.
Oh, absolutely.
And create like a truly toxic environment.
Yeah.
It's not just like a one-time thing. It's this constant drip, drip, drip of negativity and control.
Right, it wears you down.
But what really struck me in this document is the lasting impact. Like, it's not just about feeling bad in the moment. It's about the long-term effects on your mental and physical health.
Exactly, and that's what a lot of people don't realize.
So the document actually makes a direct link between, like, the stress of this abuse and some very real physical consequences.
Yeah, like you wouldn't think that emotional abuse could manifest physically. Right.
But it can.
It really can. The document even mentions the potential for self-medication with alcohol as a way to cope with the anxiety, insomnia, and stomach problems.
It makes sense, though, right, if you're constantly feeling on edge.
Yeah, you're going to try to find some way to numb those feelings.
And alcohol, it's readily available. It's a quick fix.
Right, but it's not a solution.
Definitely not. It can actually make those physical symptoms worse.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, you've got the long-term mental health consequences.
Right. It's no surprise that conditions like anxiety and depression are often linked to narcissistic abuse.
I mean, when you're constantly being criticized and manipulated and made to feel inadequate,
It takes a toll.
it's like chipping away at your sense of self-worth.
Exactly.
And even after the relationship ends, those feelings, they can linger,
Oh, absolutely.
making it difficult to trust yourself, to trust your own judgment.
It's like a ripple effect that extends far beyond the immediate relationship. The document even mentions victims of narcissistic abuse struggling with setting boundaries in future relationships.
Yeah, because their own boundaries were so violated in the abusive one.
Right? It's like you don't even know what healthy boundaries look like anymore.
Well, exactly. You've been conditioned to accept this kind of treatment.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
And, I was reading about some of the cognitive issues that can come up, like memory problems and difficulty concentrating.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
How does that tie into the abuse?
Well, the document explains that trauma can trigger the release of stress hormones.
Ah, so there's an actual physiological component.
Right. It's not just about feeling scatterbrained.
Right. There's actual science behind it.
Exactly. Those stress hormones can actually affect brain function over time.
It's like your brain is literally being rewired by the abuse.
In a way. Yeah.
It's crazy to think about the ripple effects of this kind of abuse. Like it goes so much deeper than just feeling sad or hurt.
Absolutely. It's a serious issue.
The document also talks about how narcissistic abuse can be really difficult to recognize.
It can be very subtle, especially in the beginning.
Like how so?
Well, sometimes it's disguised as jokes.
Jokes. Really?
Yeah, or presented as concern. You know, they might say something hurtful, but then brush it off as, just kidding.
But those jokes, they still sting.
They do. And over time, they can erode your self-esteem just as much as outright insults.
Like death by 1,000 cuts.
Exactly.
So how do you know if you're dealing with narcissistic abuse if it's not always so obvious?
Well, one of the biggest red flags is gaslighting.
Gaslighting.
Yeah, it's where the abuser manipulates you into questioning your own sanity and perceptions.
So they're trying to make you doubt yourself.
Exactly. They might deny things that, happen, twist your words, or make you feel like you're imagining things.
It's like they're trying to rewrite history.
In a way, they are. They're creating their own version of reality, and they're trying to force you to accept it.
That's got to be incredibly disorienting.
It is. It can make you feel like you're losing your grip on reality.
The document gives a chilling example of this.
Oh, yeah.
It describes a scenario where a narcissist might say something incredibly hurtful.
Okay.
And then when you react, they turn it around and say, oh, you're too sensitive. I didn't mean it like that.
Classic blame shifting.
It's maddening. They never take responsibility for their actions.
Never. It's always someone else's fault.
That's exhausting just thinking about it. And, this document, it doesn't shy away from the harsh realities of narcissistic abuse. It ends with this powerful call to action. It says, let's say S.P together to narcissistic abuse.
I like that. It's a reminder that we don't have to suffer in silence.
There's help out there. There are people who understand and can help.
Exactly.
So if you're listening and you're resonating with any of this, please know that you're not alone.
Your experience is valid, and there's hope for a brighter future.
That's a really important message.
Hmm.
But where do you even begin? Like, what's the first step if you think you might be experiencing narcissistic abuse?
Well, the most important thing is to acknowledge what's happening.
But that could be hard, especially if you're still in the relationship.
It is. It's easy to get caught up in denial.
Right, because you might still be holding on to that hope that things will change.
Exactly. But recognizing the signs of abuse is crucial for starting the healing process.
So how do you break free from that cycle of abuse? It sounds incredibly challenging, especially if you've been isolated from your support system.
You're right. It's not easy, but it's not impossible. And seeking professional help is a huge step in the right direction.
Therapy can be a safe space to process the trauma, rebuild self-esteem, and develop healthy coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
But the document doesn't really dive into the psychology of the narcissists themselves. I'm curious from your perspective, what drives their behavior?
That's a great question. And while this document focuses on the impact on the victim, it's important to understand that the narcissist is often struggling with deep-seated psychological issues as well.
So it's not about excusing their behavior, but understanding the underlying factors.
Exactly. At the core of narcissistic personality disorder is a profound sense of insecurity and a lack of self-worth.
Really? You wouldn't know it from their outward persona.
Right. They often appear confident, even arrogant.
It's like a facade.
Exactly. They've built up this persona to protect themselves from their own vulnerability.
So they crave admiration and validation to compensate for that inner emptiness.
Exactly. And that's where the manipulation comes in.
So they need to control others to feel a sense of power and importance.
Precisely. And they do this through charm guilt trips, gaslighting, the whole arsenal we've been discussing.
Wow. So it's all about maintaining that sense of superiority.
It is. It's a constant power struggle.
Which must be exhausting for everyone involved.
It is. You're constantly on edge, walking on eggshells, trying to avoid triggering their anger or disapproval.
It's a recipe for emotional burnout.
Absolutely.
So if someone is in a relationship with a narcissist, what can they do to protect themselves?
The most important thing is to start setting boundaries.
But how do you set boundaries with someone who is so skilled at manipulating and breaking them down?
It takes practice, and it's not always easy, but it's essential for your own well-being.
You have to start asserting your needs and standing up for yourself.
Exactly, even if it means facing resistance from the narcissist.
That takes a lot of courage, especially when you've been made to feel so small and insignificant.
It does. And sometimes the healthiest boundary you can set is to walk away from the relationship altogether.
That's a really tough decision, but sometimes it's necessary.
It is. You deserve to be in relationships where you feel respected, valued, and safe.
Wow. It's amazing how much ground we've covered about narcissistic abuse.
I know, right? We've gone from recognizing those subtle signs
To understanding the long-term impacts.
and even starting to grasp the psychology of the narcissists themselves.
It's been a lot.
It has. But I think it's so important, especially as we wrap up this deep dive.
To circle back to that core message of hope and recovery.
Exactly. Because knowing there's a path forward, that healing is possible, that's essential for anyone who's experienced this kind of abuse.
Absolutely. So where does that healing process even begin?
Well, the first and most crucial step is acknowledging what's happened. Recognizing that you've been in an abusive relationship.
Which can be so difficult.
It can. There's a tendency to minimize the abuse or blame yourself.
Especially if you're still in the relationship.
Right. It's like you're caught in this web of manipulation and it's hard to see clearly.
So how do you break free from that?
Once you start to see those patterns of manipulation, once you acknowledge the abuse for what it is.
You can start to reclaim your power.
Exactly.
And that's where seeking professional help comes in, right?
Absolutely. Therapy is invaluable in these situations.
Yeah. The document really emphasizes the importance of therapy.
It makes sense, though, because it provides that safe space to process the trauma, rebuild self-esteem, and develop healthy coping mechanisms.
It's like having a guide to help you navigate this complex world of recovery. So are there specific types of therapy that are particularly helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. Some common approaches include cognitive behavioral therapy, trauma-focused therapy, and psychodynamic therapy.
And I imagine it's important to find a therapist who specializes in trauma and abuse.
Oh, for sure. You want someone who understands the dynamics of this type of abuse.
Right, someone who you feel comfortable working with.
Exactly.
So beyond therapy, what are some other steps someone can take on their journey to recovery?
Well, rebuilding your support system is huge. Often, narcissistic abuse isolates you from friends and family.
So reconnecting with loved ones.
Yes, it can provide that much-needed sense of validation and support.
It's like rebuilding the foundation of your life.
Exactly, brick by brick.
And, something that this document doesn't explicitly say but kind of implies
What's that?
is that educating yourself about narcissistic abuse can be incredibly empowering.
Oh, I totally agree. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about the tactics narcissists use, the better equipped you'll be to protect yourself in the future.
Right, so you can spot those red flags early on.
Exactly. And avoid falling into similar patterns.
It's all about breaking the cycle of abuse, not just for yourself, but for future relationships as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a powerful takeaway from this deep dive. It's not just about understanding narcissistic abuse. It's about reclaiming your power, healing, and creating a life filled with healthy, loving relationships.
That's beautifully said. And I want to add that recovery is a journey, not a destination.
It's going to have its ups and downs.
It will. There will be moments of strength and moments of vulnerability. But with the right support, with compassion for yourself, you can heal and thrive.
This has been such an important conversation, and I really want to thank you for sharing your expertise and insights with us.
It's been a privilege to be here. And for anyone listening who's resonating with any of this,
You are not alone.
there's help available and there's hope for a brighter future.
Thank you for joining us on the Deep Dive. Keep learning, keep growing, and never stop advocating for your own well-being. And we'll catch you next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters.
See you then.